And that was my first year in year 6. So all of these things sort of layered up, and I didn't really, the thing that really gets me still is that I didn't realize any of this. Like none of this, I wasn't thinking, oh, I'm really upset about this thing, or this thing's really keeping me up at night. I didn't clock any of it. I just got my head down, carried on, thought I was quote unquote okay. It didn't happen until the May of 2019. So it was literally a week before the SATs, which again, the time's not a coincidence. A child in my class, and he found it really difficult to regulate his emotions, and he'd gone out at a break time, basically. He'd lost the ball or something, but that really set him off. And he came back into the classroom just after break time. I can literally see it now in my head. And there was books and pens going flying across the classroom. Then it was a few chairs going flying across the classroom. And I had a panic attack in the classroom.
Hello, my name's Jenna. I'm an online primary tutor. Today I'm talking to Charlie about his time in teaching before he quit teaching to become known as Teacher Health Coach on Instagram. Keep watching. Thank you very much for joining me today, Charlie. It's lovely to have you.
Hi, cheers. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Now, I was actually looking back at our conversations because I came across you, it was actually in 2022. So it's been a couple of years now since I originally spoke to you. And I was really intrigued by what you were doing because I was at a point in kind of leaving teaching, and what you were doing, obviously we'll go on to, was really, really fascinating to me, how you were supporting teachers. But let's go back to your journey as a teacher. You're obviously no longer a teacher. What did you teach, and what kind of year groups did you teach?
Yeah, so I taught for 8 years across primary, mostly in upper key stage 2, so mostly sort of year 5, 6. When I first graduated, my partner at the time had the idea to move to Thailand for a couple of years. So yeah, we worked out there for a couple of years at an international school. Say an international school, it was going through the process to get its international whatever certificate, however it works, I don't know. So yeah, we taught out there for a couple of years and then came back to the UK, and yeah, taught in a school for the remaining 6 years of my career.
Oh, wow. And what was the comparison like between teaching abroad and here?
Completely different. I think it's quite difficult to say because the school I was at was very much a new school. So it was a Thai family that were really well known in the community, and had several shops and things. They had a lot of money, and they wanted to basically build a school. So they did. They had that amount of money, and then they kind of got friends and family from their church and things like that to come in who were teachers and things. And then we obviously moved over there, and through our TEFL course got kind of put in contact with them. So it was very much a new school. I think when I started I had like 15 pupils or something. So it was a totally different experience. It was like an American curriculum and all these different things. So yeah, it was a bit of an experience, really.
Oh, wow, definitely. That sounds really fascinating, actually, to see that growth of that school.
Really
and then obviously over here it's totally different. So thinking about your time in teaching in the UK, what were the positive elements for you, and then moving on to what did you find were the challenges?
I think I love teaching, don't get me wrong. I know I'm no longer formally in the classroom, but I absolutely love teaching. I don't think I'll ever do a job where there's not an element of teaching involved. I love it. I love the whole experience of being part of somebody else's journey towards something, and that osmosis of passing on what you know and helping them to develop as an individual, but also academically and things like that. So for me, that was the thing that I loved. And again, I know that's a little bit of a vague answer, a little bit wishy-washy, but that's what I loved. It was that, I guess, that connection with the children, and kind of being in that environment where you're kind of building those relationships and building those bonds, and you get to know their parents, you get to know their younger siblings, and I guess it's the community. For me, that was always the thing in education that I loved. It was never a particular subject, although English was my jam. Like I love writing. I would happily just write as a hobby, and I often do. It's
Your posts are amazing, the ones that you do online. That makes a lot of sense now, that knowing that.
Yeah, I'm not a particularly academic person. Like I didn't do great at school. I enjoyed primary school, but didn't enjoy secondary school at all myself. So academically, I've never done very well. I'm not a particularly sporty person. I've never been on many teams and things like that. Whereas writing was always something that I could just kind of do on my own at home. And I'd have my dad's old work laptop or computer kind of set up that barely worked, and I'd
they're really chunky to type
massive
on.
deep thing. back when you had to like dial up your internet, and if someone
Yeah,
picked
it
up
took
the phone,
forever.
it went offline. That's when we got the internet. But yeah, writing's always been something I've loved, and I always loved teaching that. So yeah, I guess in terms of what I enjoy is those relationships, that connection, just that whole being part of someone else's development. I love, and similar to what I do now. I don't think of myself as having. I've left the classroom, but I don't feel like I've left teaching necessarily, because
Ah.
teaching and coaching are kind of two sides of a very similar coin, I find. In terms of what was hard, though, that's obviously much bigger question. I wrote something about this earlier, actually. It was never the 9 to 3. Now, the school that I was in an area of quite low socioeconomic status, if you like, or an area of deprivation in some ways. And we had a lot of families who needed a lot of support, and so we had a lot of children that needed a heck of a lot of support. And behaviour was something that became a challenge at points, but even despite that, within the 9 to 3, there wasn't a huge amount of kind of challenge. I loved it. I loved so much of it, and I loved being part of a team. And I was fortunate to work under a head who was quite compassionate and understanding and things. And not everyone in our teams is like that, but I had lots of colleagues who were, and that was awesome. So the 9 to 3 was okay. For me, it was the extras and the additional pressure. But I'm sure we'll get onto this later. A lot of my, I'm going to say, negative experiences in teaching and in education came from within, and it was almost like an externalization of things. So, for example, I was in year 6, and the amount of internal pressure I put on myself to get certain results, and as you probably gathered, I'm not particularly much of a results driven teacher. I loved the rest of it. I wasn't data. I'm not into that. Still I'm not, despite running a business, which is its own problem at times. But I'm not a very much data driven person. So being in year 6 and all of that, and having suddenly, all of SLT with you in a room talking about things like data and how we have to reach this combined score, and how we compare to other schools, and all of that pressure, I then internalized, and I sort of took it upon myself. So again, we might get into it later, but linking back to like my own personal low self-worth, and kind of me looking for validation in teaching, and looking for validation in what the children were able to do, which is completely out of my control. That for me is what brought a lot of negative experiences. So I over delivered a lot. I'd be the first in the car park and the last to leave. And it got to a point, and now I understand the neuroscience of why, but it got to a point where I kind of liked it. I liked being the hardest worker, so to speak.
Feed off that kind of like adrenaline, don't you?
That adrenaline, that cortisol buzz. And now we know that cortisol and dopamine, adrenaline and dopamine and cortisol, they're like 3 cousins. They all feed off each other, and then increased adrenaline can increase our dopamine, so we can get addicted to that state of stress. It is possible. So I definitely did, and I, as I say, I would, my sort of self-worth then became tied up in, oh, I'm the first in, I'm the last out. And when my friends would say to me, this is sort of early in my 20s, I'm in my early 30s now, but this is early to mid 20s, my friends would be going to festivals, Glastonbury. I've never been to Glastonbury. The only one of my friends, we're a big friend group, who hasn't gone to Glastonbury because of, oh no, I can't get a day off for that. And I liked that. I liked being busy all the time, and it made me feel good, and it validated me. So a lot of my struggles, and I'm not saying this is the same for anyone else, by the way, this is just my experience, but a lot of my struggles came from an internal place, basically, that then manifested in my workload, and manifested the amount of nights, honestly, I was up till midnight just tweaking my slides because I wanted them to look pretty. Completely useless, pointless. No one else noticed, but I felt good about myself because my slides were really cool, basically. So yeah, a lot of these internal drivers sort of like mixed up with that external pressure to create this perfect storm of like unbelievable workload and time put into teaching. So that's probably the thing that I found the hardest.
There's 2 things I want to pick up on what you said. Number 1, year 6 role. If you aren't in teaching, I spoke to another person, another tutor, on another video about the role of being a year 6 teacher, because outside of teaching, you don't understand the level of pressure associated with being a year 6 teacher. It is really intense, because if the SATs results are not good, then you have Ofsted on your back, then you have leadership on your back, then you have all these people, visitors, monitoring experts coming in, and they are on your back. And I can totally understand that. And then the second thing that you mentioned, obviously coming from you internally, I can relate to that, because that was, in my experience, very much encouraged in some schools. In some schools, you know, you just got on with the job. There was no emphasis on what time you came in, no emphasis on what time you went out. But there were schools I was in, and yes, I'm so relating to you on many points, because I was like that. I would be the stupid person that would be up at night, 11, 12 o'clock. Oh, hold on, I need to, and I couldn't settle until I like settled it, or da 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 da. But then the next day when the event would happen, the lesson would happen with the perfect slides, something else would have taken over and you would have forgotten about it. Well, that I certainly did, but you spent hours so stressed about that little thing. But I do also think schools, the environment sometimes impacted that. You know, comments were made to me, oh, what time are you leaving? Or what time did you work till last night? And it wasn't encouraged that, you know, you went home early, that kind of thing. But I do understand it coming from yourself as well. So then for you, what was the deciding factor? So you're talking about all those different things that are obviously building up that pressure, but what in the end was the thing that made you think, right, I need to make a change now?
So it was one academic year. I pin it down to sort of a 6-month period. So late in the autumn term, so this was 2018, must have been 28, yeah, autumn term 2018. I think my dates might be off there, but I think, yeah, it must have been. Yes, it was. Yeah. So I'd only been working with a colleague, my LSA, for 3 or 4 months by this point, but she really quickly became like my nan. So I haven't got any grandparents who are alive, and she was the school nan, but she quickly became my nan. Smoked like a trooper, drank gin like a fish, loved a caravan weekend. She was awesome. She was just such a lovely lady, such a light. She was diagnosed with terminal cancer. So she went off poorly at the end of the autumn term and never came back, sadly. So I was keeping in touch with her sort of on and off and things, and she was sending me pictures of a new hairdo and all this kind of stuff. But sadly, in early June, I believe, early June 2019, she passed away. Now, so that was going on in the background. My partner that I spoke about, my previous partner, who I was to Thailand with, she decided to move to Africa to au pair and teach out there. And then signed up to a second year without telling me that relationship wasn't going to work. So that relationship for 5 years ended at the same time. And that was my first year in year 6. So all of these things sort of layered up. And I didn't really, the thing that really gets me still is that I didn't realize any of this. Like none of this, I wasn't thinking, oh, I'm really upset about this thing, or this thing's really keeping me up at night. I didn't clock any of it. I just got my head down, carried on, thought I was quote unquote okay. And it all, obviously, we know what it's like, right? We can't bury emotions and thoughts and feelings down. It's a volcano, it's going to come out elsewhere. And that didn't happen until the May of 2019. So it was literally a week before the SATs, which again, the time's not a coincidence. And basically I was teaching and I had, again, my first year 6 class, and I'd moved up from year 4, so they felt a lot older. You know what I mean? It was quite a big jump. And obviously year 6 nowadays, you know, they're beginning as adolescence, hormones are raging, behavior can sometimes be very difficult to kind of work with children on. And there was a child in my class and he found it really difficult to regulate his emotions, and he'd gone out at a break time. Basically, he'd lost the ball or something, or been tackled, or he wasn't, I don't know, captain or something quite minimal, but that really set him off. And he came back into the classroom just after break time. I can literally see it now in my head. And there was books and pens going flying across the classroom. Then it was a few chairs going flying across the classroom. And I dealt with all that before. You know, it wasn't a new situation for me. It wasn't, you know, multiple times, probably every other week that year we'd been working on it, and we built up a great relationship as well. And I believe actually he was on a reduced timetable, so I think at that point he was working back up his time he was in school. Anyway, I basically, to cut a long story short, had a panic attack in the classroom, and it was only the second panic attack I'd ever had in my life. The first one was in Thailand, and I didn't know what panic attack was. Didn't know anything about that. Like, mental health, that's someone else, that's not me. I don't have mental health. That was my attitude back then. And essentially had a panic attack in the classroom. Was sent home, called 111, just because obviously, you know, I don't know if you've had a panic attack, but it feels like a heart attack essentially, and that's the only way I can describe it. Anyone who doesn't know what that feels like, it feels like you're having a heart attack, and your brain convinces you this is it, basically, for want of a better phrase. So I called 111 because I was genuinely concerned, like something's wrong with me. You know, I didn't for a second think it was related to mental health. I didn't put two and two together. I just thought that was someone else's thing. You know, someone else experiences that. And then 111 sent a paramedic round. They wouldn't take no for an answer. So I was sat in my parents' living room, having just driven myself home, which probably wasn't a great idea, white as a sheet, with a paramedic with all these wires and things on me. And everything was coming up okay because I had obviously come out of the other side of it. Anyway, ended up in hospital, blood tests, ECGs, consultations, all this kind of stuff. And again, to cut a bit of a long story short, after a day in hospital and a 24-hour ECG after that, it turns out that it was chronic stress and anxiety. And I remember having the conversation with the doctor, and him, my caffeine intake was one thing. Having 6 coffees a day to get through is apparently not a good idea.
That's insane.
And he said, "What do you do?" And I said, "I'm a teacher." And he kind of said, like, "Are you stressed?" And I literally laughed. You know, I don't know if it was like this busy badge of honor. I don't know, but I was like, "I'm a teacher. I'm stressed." I don't know what it was, but I couldn't believe he was asking me if I was stressed. And he just looked at me deadpan and was like, I think I was 26 at the time. He was like, you can't be like this. You need to do something. You need to sort this out. The way you're working isn't working." And that was it. That was the moment that I essentially went on a 6-month journey of essentially recovery. And there was coaching involved, there was counseling involved. And then at the end of that, I started my nutrition qualification. And that was the beginning of where I am now. So yeah, a bit of a journey.
Wow. And were you at school, or did you just leave straight away?
So I was in the classroom. I remember, and this is the thing, when I was having that panic attack, there were beads of sweat coming off my face. It felt like someone had put a fridge over on my chest. I was just dizzy, just really, really dizzy.
I'm
And
surprised they let you drive home.
I know, it was quite, so it was about an hour between then and driving home. So I literally walked. So our classrooms were one long corridor with 4 rooms on. So I was opposite my year leader's classroom, and I kind of stumbled to the door, and I must have looked really ill. And I literally said to her, I was like, "I need to lie down," and I couldn't really speak. And I just literally stumbled my way to the staff room, and no one was in there. And I laid in there for about 10 minutes, and then I was like, "Well, what do I do? I don't want to go back there, you know." So I stumbled to the assistant or deputy head, assistant, I think that she was an assistant head's office, and I sat in there with her and our safeguarding lead for probably about the end of half an hour or so. And I don't know, I just thought I'd by that point, through talking it through, I'd calmed down. I thought I'd like caught a bug or something, or I just hadn't eaten enough. I was trying to piece together, and not once did I think it's related to stress and mental health. Not once did it cross my mind. So yeah, that was the beginning.
And what was their reaction when you came in looking like that?
Just, "You're not well." That was it. It was just, "You're not well." To be fair, they were really understanding, because I can expect some leaders might have been cross that I've just walked out of the classroom. I mean, we had plenty of LSAs in that team at that time, in other classes, and HLTAs that I don't even know, never asked, but probably came in to cover me at last minute. But they were very understanding, and I think they just thought I just wasn't well, like I was just coming down with something. I don't know. Yeah, and I sat and talked it through, and it never went back to mental health. I was just saying things like, "I feel really hot, I feel really cold, I feel really sick, I feel really dizzy," and I think we all just assumed I'd got a bug or something.
And then, did you ever return to the school?
Yeah. So I went back a few days later. So I was told to take a week off. Went back a few days later, and I literally spent the next 2 days, like after the hospital, literally like in bed. And I went back into school. I remember my year leader meeting me in the corridor and saying to me, like, "You shouldn't be here. Like, you don't look well." But obviously, by this point, we're 3 or 4 days away from the SATs. So there's me kind of thinking, like, I've got to do something. I've got to be there for the children. And then actually, this came to my head the other day. Actually, I was in the garden. This happened 2 years in a row, which is really bizarre. I was in the garden and I stood on a wasp. So when we were actually administering the SATs, I didn't have one shoe on, and I was sort of walking around with this massive swollen foot as well,
Oh,
trying to administer the SATs. And I had the head teacher in my room as well. She was lovely. She was incredible about all of this. Although I didn't divulge much about the mental health side of things, because I didn't feel comfortable. I just sort of tried to play it down, sort of thing. But yeah, trying to administer the SATs with a giant swollen foot was difficult. And yeah, happened 2 years in a row, which is bonkers.
gosh.
Same week, yeah.
Just you talking though, it's like a shopping basket. And you go shopping and like you put one thing in, another thing in, another thing in. The way you describe it, like they're all on separate days, but like they're all, the basket's getting heavier to manage. And eventually that basket is just gonna break and can't cope anymore. And it's like not that you'd break, I don't mean like that, but like
Yeah.
it's just that layering. And at some point, because like when you step away from it, but I can understand in that kind of headspace at school, you just wanted to be the best teacher you can be. And it's all for the kids and it's all for the school. And, you keep going and it doesn't matter. And it was like a badge of honor. It doesn't matter how poorly you are. Like you were kind of rewarded for, oh, thanks so much. Even though you're really bad, you've come in, you've sorted it, you've da 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 da. And, it's so, it's just not right, is it? It's just not right. Like that whole mentality. You shouldn't have to give everything of your being to survive the job. So then, from that point, what year 6 SATs happened, and then that 6-month period then. So what kind of happened over that? Did you start to form an idea of what you wanted to do next? Did you even think, right, I'm going to go? Or did it just come to you all of a sudden? Or like, what was that process like?
Yeah. So went back into school. Obviously, the SATs happened, and then in year 6, you've got, later on in the term, you've got like your writing moderations and stuff, haven't you? So after the SATs are done, it's let's get all the writing, make sure everyone's got all their writing evidence and stuff. So the learning didn't stop, right? The teaching didn't stop. It carried. Again, though, I loved teaching writing. So not all writing, but not all of English, but the grammar and stuff, but definitely the writing side. So I quite enjoyed that little bit of time. That was maybe half a term, I think, give or take, it was, with all that writing stuff. And then obviously year 6, it's certain things start to increase and certain things start to wind down and all the rest of it. So saw out that academic year, and by the end of the academic year, I did feel a bit better because I was doing things like going home that bit earlier. And when people say as well-being advice, go home earlier, that for me, that's not well-being advice. That's just a very generic thing. But that's one of the things I started to do, and I started to find ways that enable me to do that, and ways that I could do less of things like make my slides look really pretty, like using resources and things that already existed rather than making everything from scratch with Microsoft Word. All of these little things, seeing my friends more, going out and trying to move my body that little bit more, and actually eating enough food and being conscious of what nutrition I'm getting and things like that. My sleep was a big one. So looking at my screen time and how I can improve my sleep. And then by this point, I'd met my now fiance by this point. And that, she was incredible throughout the whole process. I remember sitting in her mum's living room, to go back quickly. I remember having heart palpitations and being like, this isn't right. This isn't supposed to happen to a 26-year-old. Fairly at that point, I was fairly fit. I wasn't an athlete or anything, but I was fairly fit. But all of this chronic cortisol and stress that's just come back into my mind. But yeah, so I met her, and things were starting to improve. So then I started the next academic year, which was obviously September 2019, leading up to COVID that we didn't know about, was around the corner. So that half term, I'd sort of recovered, like I say, a bit of a 4 to 6 month process. I'd kind of put a lot of things in place that started to really, really help. And then I just got really interested in it. I was like, well, why am I feeling better? How does this work? And my first initial interest was in the nutrition side of things. So in September 2019, I also started an online nutrition qualification. So I went and got my level 4. And then I just started working with like friends and family, basically, just for free, just supporting them with their nutrition. Some of it was around sort of more health and longevity, energy levels, things like that. Some of it was around weight loss. And I just started working with friends and family across that term. And I literally just started an Instagram page. And it wasn't a company, but the name I used was Forge Fitness and Nutrition. And I registered as a sole trader and just started that page. And I know we might get on to talk about social media maybe a little bit later, but the one thing that was in my head wasn't about going viral or having a certain post or having being an influencer or building a brand or anything like that. It was literally, let's just put some stuff out that I know could help somebody else. And that's all I've ever tried to do, is just be helpful, just create a page that is useful to other people. So that was it. That's what I did. And that kind of went on right up until COVID started. And then obviously COVID changed our worlds just a little bit. But yeah, I was teaching full time and then just doing this on the weekends, just literally just for fun.
Oh, wow. And it was just you doing it at the time?
Yeah, just me.
Oh, okay. So then did you do the whole of that academic year?
Yep. So I saw, obviously, then COVID happened in March, wasn't it, I think? And then I was in school for a little bit, and then we worked from home, and none of us knew what we were doing. And we were just sort of trying to put together online lessons, and that lockdown was interesting, wasn't it? Just trying to find, what the heck am I supposed to be doing right now? And actually, for me personally, I know COVID it was a devastating time for so many people, and so many people lost loved ones. So I always feel a bit funny saying this, but for me, that was actually positively contributed to my recovery, I would say, because I wasn't in the school building and I was online teaching, and I didn't have to drive into work, and I didn't have to be up as early, and I could go for my one day mandated walk or whatever it was, So for me, COVID wasn't, the isolation and stuff got to us all later, I think. But for me, COVID wasn't the experience that I know lots of people had. But yeah, sort of saw out obviously that COVID year. I think by that summer we were coming back out of lockdown, and we could
and then
sit in a
there was
pub
kind of
garden.
something else then, wasn't there, in 2021?
Yeah,
Later
we
on
added another
around
one
time.
back in. Yeah, so I went through that academic year. We were back in school with my year sixes again by June. I think year ones and year sixes were back in school by June 2020, I think. And we saw out that academic year. And then I did one more academic year after that with my year 5 class, my favorite class I ever taught. I know I can say that now because I'm not in teaching anymore. They were my favorite class ever. Absolutely brilliant bunch. So yeah, I did one more academic year in 2021, and then in September 21, I went part-time for a term, and then in January 22, I left altogether.
And what was the deciding factor? Like, what made you think I can make a career out of this new information I'm gathering? Like, was there a moment, or was it just gradually?
I think it was quite gradually, to be honest. Like, I remember back in the day, I'd be charging £40 a month, and I'd be working with maybe 8 or 9 people who I had just met through Instagram. And it was very much, I was building this program as I went. I went from friends and family, qualified, got insured, and then just started working with people I'd met online. And they weren't teachers. Some of them were, most of them weren't. But then gradually over time, more and more of my friends and family who wanted to work with me, and friends of friends were teachers, and friends of colleagues were teachers. So very naturally over that period of time, things started to grow, very slowly, but they started to grow. And I basically at one point, almost my whole client roster was teachers. And I kind of thought, it makes perfect sense. I'm still in teaching, and I hadn't planned to leave at that point. So it was all just a side hustle, as they say. I was still in teaching. I knew teaching like the back of my hand. I knew the struggles. I knew what I'd been through. And now most of my clients are teachers. I thought, why not just pivot this a little bit and become the teacher's health coach, so to speak. Very grand, what's the word? Self-grandizing, is that the word? It's not even the word, is it?
Sure.
But yeah, self-given title, that is, isn't it? The teacher's health coach. But I just thought, keep it simple. Don't complicate it. It is what it is. It does what it says on the box. And yeah, so sort of created, registered that company. And then my client list started to grow a little bit more, and then kind of fine-tuned all of my content and my blogs and things to just what I had been through, what my experiences were, what my clients were telling me, and then looked for solutions to that. So then started to take everything I knew from like the nutrition world and then my coaching qualification and started to kind of build it into things that were specific to teachers. So things around break time and lunchtime, emotion-led eating, managing stress, managing sleep when you got thoughts of work keeping you up, and starting to come up with like systems and procedures that I could work with clients on and take them through a bit of a journey with. And yeah, that got me, I'm not sure what date we're up to now. This is maybe 2021, give or take. I started my mental health and exercise coaching qualification, my MHEC. So that was essentially combining neuroscience, mental health coaching, and exercise, and almost using exercise as a tool or as a prescription to help with mental health and to support mental health. So that was a year-long qualification. That was really interesting. And then again, that added layers to what I did. So now it's very much not just, some of my clients want to lose weight and that's part of their journey, and that's part of what they want to do. That's awesome. I can help with that. But it's very much geared towards increasing energy, building a better life-work balance, improving their self-confidence, managing their stress, and all these sorts of things. So yeah, it's a bit of a wiggly, windy, weird route, but it all sort of like came together. There was no like one moment. It all just sort of started to thread in, kind of like a river sort of flowing. Yeah.
You've definitely, I'm going to sound really cringy now, you've niched down. And I think that does help because obviously you were quite general in the beginning. And then obviously seeing that need, you were like responding to that need. And do you find that you kind of, once you narrowed down on what you were actually doing and who you were helping, has that helped you focus more now with your business and what to offer and what to help moving forward? Or is it, do you help other people as well as teachers now, or is it just mainly teachers?
Absolutely. So it is literally those working in education. So I've worked with kind of CEOs of trusts, head teachers, assistant head teachers, SENCOs, class-based teachers.
Oh wow, that's incredible.
PAs and LSAs. So anyone in the world of education, essentially. That every teacher I'm working with at the moment, every person I'm working with at the moment is in education. Over the years, I've had like a few people be friends of a friend or friends of a teacher or someone who's seen something who sort of said, I'm not a teacher, or I used to be a teacher. Does this all still apply? And it's just about tweaking it to that individual and coaching them, because the way that I see it is I'm not there to do anything for them. As a coach, I'm not there to do the work for them. I'm not there to make the change. I'm not even there to tell them what to do, which I think surprises some people. I'm just the guide. I'm just the bloke next to you with the map of the road. You're in the driving seat. I'm just there to kind of point out a few things, offer suggestions, offer tips, and people choose. And I think that's what I love about the way that we do coaching, is that I will work with someone. I won't tell someone what to do specifically. Always offer suggestions, and obviously in the beginning of our coaching, this is a bit of a tangent, sorry, but in the beginning with our coaching, it's a little bit more sort of instructional, because we might have certain things and I might need to explain certain concepts and help people with certain strategies. But over time, just like a teacher, my goal is to take the scaffolding off until you can stand on your own. Because just like a teacher, my goal is to make myself obsolete, basically. Like a good coach doesn't want to coach someone for 20 years. A good coach knows that their job is to help this person do this by themselves. So yeah, I don't know how I got into that in my mind, but that's kind of the way that I think about coaching as well.
You've kind of answered one of my questions, like what kind of skills have you taken from teaching? One of my next questions, sorry, skills that you've taken, and that's really interesting. You said about the scaffolding, but if we look at then, because that's quite a range of people in education that you work with, when teachers come to you and then when leadership come to you, are their stresses similar or are they different? Generally,
there's definitely similarities, 100% similarities, and a lot of like the stresses of leaders are things like and again, so it sometimes takes a few weeks or a few months to kind of work with someone until you build that much of a rapport, that much of a relationship where they'll open up to you about these sorts of things. So I don't necessarily post the real deep dark stuff that people talk to me about, and people tell me all sorts. Like people
Yeah,
quite
yeah.
regularly, I'd probably say the majority of my clients talk to me about things they wouldn't talk to anyone else about, which I feel very like proud and very honored to be able to fulfill that role for them. But when so I don't post about this stuff as much online, because online is the beginning of your world, isn't it? It's the surface of your world, and it takes time for people to open up about these things. But what I find is that with leadership, a lot of their deep worries and insecurities and concerns and things that add to their stress because of that are things like wanting to make sure that they're doing a good job for their staff, and wanting to make sure that their staff, it sounds really childish, but like them back. Like they want to be a great leader for their
Yeah.
staff, and they want their staff to go, yes, amazing, I love to work for so and so. Like they're fantastic. They look out for us. They've got our best interests at heart. And leaders worry about that, and they worry constantly about their staff and what they can do to help them. Like it's a constant thing, and that's very similar to a teacher worrying about the children in their class. Not saying that teachers are the children of leaders. You know what I mean?
No,
It's
but
a
it's
similar.
relatable though. It's,
Yeah.
yeah, I understand it though. I know what you mean.
Yeah, so there's that like just concern for others, wanting to do a good job. I don't think anyone in education is it can get away from that to some extent. Another thing that I've come across quite a lot of leaders is that sometimes these I'm not trying to tell anyone what they're experiencing. This is just what I've observed from clients and chats online, is that sometimes people can get into leadership positions without certain training that they would benefit from. So we're just thrown into a leadership position without much support on, well, what is a leader? How does a leader lead teams? How do you support your team? What does it mean to be a great leader? So there can be a lot of insecurities around their leadership and how good of a leader they are. So that comes out quite a lot. And obviously you've then got the workload that goes without saying. Most of this stuff goes without saying, I think. But with the workload as a head teacher or a leader or someone, you've got not just responsibilities for the children in your class and their families, but you've got all your colleagues, and you've got their responsibilities to sometimes be mindful of. And like I say, you've got so much pressure coming down on you that you're trying to shelter your staff from. You're trying to be that umbrella that protects your staff, but that's all coming down on your shoulders. So the mental and emotional toll that I think that can take on leaders is, from what I've seen, is immense. So that's huge. Yeah, similarities and differences. There's a lot of similarities. Like workload is a big one. Like ruminating thoughts, intrusive thoughts, keeping you up at night, worries and concerns around doing a good job, stress, emotion-led eating.
Do you
Yeah,
think that's the biggest worry out of everything?
I think so. I'd probably say so. And again, I don't want to talk for anyone else's experience. This is just what I've seen. But I would say that workload, if we put that stuff under the umbrella of workload, and managing your time and being able to compartmentalize work and have those boundaries around work. I think for teachers and for leaders, it's really, really similar. I mean, Education Support's 2024 Wellbeing Index, I think it came out this week. And I was looking through that, giving that a read through today. And there's some really interesting stuff in this year's one. But it just goes to show that leadership are struggling as much, if not more, according to that report, as class-based teachers. And I think this is a bit of a tangent, but I was chatting to some leaders about this recently. And as a teacher, for a long time, I put my well-being on their plate, as if you need to look after my well-being. You are responsible for my workload. Like, you help me. And actually, it's well-being is everyone's responsibility. It really, really
Yeah.
is. So it's as much mine as it is theirs. It's a team sport, isn't it? Really, teaching.
Yeah. One thing you mentioned about leaders, which I found interesting but relatable, is that the training that they're given as leaders. So in my experience, like I went from a class teacher to kind of like middle leader. I had to do RE, and I wasn't given any training at all. I was expecting to be given training, but I was essentially handed a set of folders and said, off you go. And I was like, what do I do now? Don't really know. And the thing was, the kind of culture that was being promoted in lots of schools I went into, oh, you should know this. You're an experienced teacher. And I'm like, well, hang on a minute. I've not had any training in anything. But because I wanted to be the best, I didn't want to complain. I just got on with it and I just took the criticism. Whereas now when I've stepped away, like I'm a few years out now, I think, why didn't I say, like, you haven't trained me? I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm trying my absolute best,
Yeah.
but I don't know what I'm doing. But yeah, the sad thing is now, and you've probably heard of the group Life After Teaching, the amount of times, you can't fail in teaching because you are put on a support plan. And the outside world might think, oh, that's good, a support plan, they're offering support, but it's not. 9 times out of 10, you are essentially, you never get off these support plans, and you try and do it. There's some people have, but it takes a lot of effort to get off, or you leave.
Yeah.
You leave before they make it really, really bad for you. And I think that attitude has to change in schools. You can't ask for help. You can't be seen to not know what you're doing, because we expect the children to ask and, ask for help. But if teachers ask, you can't. Like, you literally, in some cases, some people nearly lose their jobs for asking for help. And so, how do you think we should move forward from that? Like, obviously, you are supporting a lot of teachers, a lot of leadership, which is amazing because they need that support. But until things change within, that kind of wider change won't happen. I don't know the way forward for that, but I think
Yeah.
it's great that you've got the resources to help people individually. And yes, you should be responsible for your own. But I think there's got to be a wider kind of effort. Right, sorry, I've kind of gone on one there. But so then, what kind of strategies do you offer to teachers, helping them out? So just an example, maybe a teacher comes to you and says about workload, what kind of, say, 3 steps you might, or 2 steps, whatever it is, the strategy that you use, what initially would you say to them to help them with that?
I think that the first thing I'll always do, whatever the problem is give. So if it's a one-to-one coaching client, either we have a phone call or we have like a Zoom call like this, or in some cases we'll go back and forward in message or voice note or whatever within the app. But the first thing I try and do is just hold space for that person, because in so many schools, like you say, sadly, still people don't feel seen, they don't feel heard, they don't feel valued. And what's about to come out of this person's brain has been in there for years, maybe even decades. And they've been worrying and thinking and ruminating and stressing about this for such a long time. This pressure's built up. So if I turn around and say, and they say, I'm struggling with work, and if I turn around and say, right, I want you to do this, then this, then this, then this, then this, I've completely skipped over the main thing, which is helping them just feel like someone's listening. And I think, just jump back to the leadership thing, if leaders can help our staff feel seen and heard and valued, and that doesn't cost a penny, it just costs a little bit of time, which I know is again another resource in school. But I feel like that's the main thing, to help people feel seen, heard and valued before anything else, because we're a tribal species, right? And that's part of us feeling connected. So that's always number one. Like, whatever the problem, give that person, hold space for that person. And if it's a case of they then talk to me for an hour and I literally listen and jot down a couple of notes, and then we come back to it another time, then that's fine, because that's what they need. But sometimes we'll get to a point where they're ready to talk about strategies. And I always ask people, do you want me to hear you, or do you want me to help you, or a little bit of both? And sometimes
That's
they're like,
amazing. I like that.
hear you, help you, or both. Because the last thing I want to do is hinder them, right? That's option 3 that I never want to do. So I always just check, like, what do they feel they need? And I always like to leave people with something practical. But it doesn't always happen, but I like to kind of give them just something to take forward, and it might be something really small. So with the boundaries example, once I've kind of listened to them and heard them out, and I feel like I've got a good grasp of what the problem is, or the workload, sorry, we'll then maybe start to talk about how they kind of feel about it, and more from the mindset angle of, why do they feel their workload's got to this point, or why do they feel they can't close their laptop? And even kind of going through together and through coaching, kind of exploring a few what ifs. Okay, you've got this whatever this resource to make for the morning, right? And it's 9 p.m. already, and it's going to take you another hour. What if you close that laptop and you just go and do something? You read a book for half an hour, then you go to bed. Like, what if that happens? What is going to happen? So a lot of exploring basically is what I'm trying to say. A lot of talking through potential solutions and exploring, because what that person often has is a bit of a limiting belief and almost attaching their self-worth to get into the bottom of their to-do list. So I know this is a bit abstract, but it's very much getting into the person's mind and helping them see things of, okay, right, is the problem the fact that I've got this thing on my to-do list or this amount of workload, or is it the way that I'm looking at it? Because I love that phrase of, when we change the way we look at things, the things we look at change. So if we can look at things from a different angle, we might be able to find something that we can, oh, well, brilliant, I'll give this a go. And then kind of starting to get a bit more practical, then it will obviously lean towards like boundaries, right? And boundaries is a word that I think is thrown around an awful lot, but there's boundaries around your time, there's boundaries around if you're actually physically in the building, in school, there's boundaries around your materials, boundaries around your, obviously your personal space, but there's also boundaries around like your intellectual property sort of thing, like the stuff that you create and what you bring to school and your professional boundaries and stuff. So there's a lot of boundaries. It's not just leave, like I said earlier, it's not just, oh, leave school at 4 p.m. and it'll be okay. Like, that's very much surface level stuff.
That can be scary for some teachers if you just say, "I'll just go at 4." My heart would be like, what about tomorrow? What about tomorrow? What about all the stuff we've got to do?
That's it. And that's a really good point. So going back to like the whole mindset thing, you and I having this conversation will look like this, but me having this conversation with someone else is going to look completely different. And that's what I love about one-to-one coaching, is that no two people's solutions are the same. So the boundaries that you and I might come up with around what time you feel like you want to leave, how we're going to make that work, are we going to create like a bit of a power down routine that kind of cues your brain up to getting ready to leave? Are we going to come up with some kind of system there around timers and reminders? Are we going to get some accountability from colleagues? Like, how are we actually going to how are we going to get you to leave early? Like, what's the system going to be? That's going to be totally different to somebody else. So yeah, we'll talk in work, like we'll talk about boundaries, but then there's also other things that we can talk about. So we can talk about how you're prioritizing tasks, and we can use things like, you know, the Eisenhower matrix, the 4Ds, the do, delay, delegate, delete. We can use the prioritization matrix. We can even as simple as things that I absolutely need to do, i.e., if I don't do them now, the children aren't getting taught tomorrow. That's basically all that falls in that category. And safeguarding, right? Even medium-term planning, data drops, putting your data on target tracker or whatever you use, that's not a need to do right now. Like, no one's gonna die because you ain't got that done, right? Whereas if you don't know what you're teaching in the morning, people are probably not going to get taught anything. So pretty much that's all that goes in that need to do category. But need to do's and nice to do's, like just really simple, like what can wait, what can I put on, or even kind of like need to do's, could do's, and probably won't bother doing sort of things. So having this kind of system. So prioritization's a big one. And something that I'm really interested in at the moment is kind of like productivity. Now, I know productivity is a bit of a wishy-washy term, but things like sort of exploiting our own dopamine loops. So starting with what I call tiddler tasks. So little things that we can do that start to increase the dopamine being our kind of like our drive and our motivation, if you like. It's the anticipation of reward chemical. And we get it through putting in small amounts of effort and seeing a small reward. We get it artificially almost, it's not a very scientific word, but junk dopamine, if you like, through scrolling, you know, being super comfortable, all the good stuff we all like to do, right? Eating loads of super tasty food, particularly highly processed food, all the stuff that we all like, and I do, absolutely. But if we rely on that too much, we don't have a drive to go and get this this natural dopamine by doing these little things. So we can exploit kind of our dopamine loop. We can exploit our like habit loops and how we form habits. We can look at techniques like the Pomodoro timer or the Pomodoro technique, where it's like a 25-minute work block or a 55-minute work block if you want a long one, and then like a 5 or a 15-minute break. So there's loads in here, and things like using music to kind of focus the brain and using like binaural beats. My favorite one, which I use quite a lot, is putting a sign on my classroom door and then facing the classroom door on my laptop with headphones in and basically pretending I'm in a Zoom meeting. Because if you don't lie, it's bending the truth, right? Like there's such a big question, but there's so many different things. And because everyone is individual, there's so many different strategies that everyone can use and we can put in. But I could be here all day talking about that. It's a big question.
my goodness. Do you ever do wellbeing packages for schools?
Mm. So we started that last September. So I'm working with a few schools, and what we're doing more of at the moment is going into schools and offering like annual support packages. So
Oh,
going in and kind of, so the one that schools seem to like the most is 3 in-person sessions, so like one a term, 3 in-person sessions, and then the alternate half terms like an online Zoom Q&A, sort of open office surgery type thing, where teachers
yeah.
can come in and ask questions, get support with problems they face that half term. So 3 in-person, 3 online, and then I give schools access to our portal. So it's called the Rewriting Wellbeing Portal, and it's got kind of mini courses, and it's got a community page. It's got resources they can use. It's like an ongoing support. So rather than it being a 45-minute well-being talk where everyone's like, oh yeah, okay, leave school early, meditate, yep, like yoga Thursdays, brilliant, thanks for that, like nothing useful, nothing that's actually going to help the problem. It's an ongoing support system. So yeah, that's something we started doing in the last couple of years, but next year is something we'd like to do a lot more often.
That's amazing. Like, I didn't even know half the strategies that you mentioned, and they sound really, really good. Really good. So then let's talk about the world of social media.
Yeah.
It can be quite difficult. I'm nowhere near on your level in terms of, you know, business size or anything like that. But it can be difficult as a business owner and, you know, personally and professionally. So how have you found, are you just on Instagram, or because that's where I know you from, but do you have Facebook and all the others?
Mm. So this is one thing I don't do that well, which is kind of like, if you want to use the word diversifying, like where I am on social media, it's a project that I need to work on. Like I create reels sometimes for Instagram, and I just don't share them to YouTube Shorts or TikTok. I don't know
Yeah.
why I don't. I just post it, and by the time I post it, I'm like, right, cool, it's 7 p.m. Like this,
I know.
let's
It's
let's
like a
take a break.
degree though, the amount of stuff
It
that's
is.
available out there.
It really is. It really is. Yeah. So I'm mostly on Instagram, like 95% on Instagram. I'm trying to post some blogs onto LinkedIn for the school facing
Okay.
things. I do a Facebook page, but it just cross posts from Instagram, so it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a lot easier, that is, the Meta app. So
yeah.
easy to do it. But so how have you found Instagram then for your business? Has it been, it's obviously very beneficial. That's where you get your clients mainly from, would you say?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, lovely. And how do you, as a business owner, you know, keep up to date with it, keep on top of it, that kind
Mhm.
of thing? Because there is a lot of pressure, and it is coming from the apps.
Yeah.
Because if you don't keep posting and if you don't keep interacting, like I find Instagram really intense compared to Facebook. It's just like you have to do so much stuff just to keep it going. But how do you manage that? Because obviously you're very busy with the school packages, with your one-to-one coaching, with your website and everything you're doing. How do you manage that? Or do you get someone else to manage it for you? Because I know when people get bigger and bigger, they do get other people to do tasks just to help you out really and take that off your hands.
Yeah. So I think the way I'm still trying to view Instagram, and I've been pulled this year, I've been sort of like a magnet pulled away from this slightly, but I am still really trying to view it as it's just a platform to help people.
Mm,
And even if I turn around and said, right, I'm stopping all this, I'm going back into the classroom, I'd still post to Instagram something. I'd post something that I think is helpful and useful. So the way that I view it is, it's just ideas. It's ideas that I think can have a positive impact on someone else's life, and that gives me that little bit of like meaning. It's very cheesy, but it's sort of my why. It's if I put this out there, and obviously it's nice when you then get the external validation of people saying this is really helpful, but quite often you don't get that stuff. But then someone will talk to you 3 months later and be like, oh, that post you did about this thing, yeah, that was really helpful, but they didn't like it, they didn't comment it, but
mm,
people are seeing it, is what I'm trying to get at. People are seeing your content. So I try and view it as just trying to be helpful, just trying as much as possible. And I know sometimes in the business world it's like providing value and stuff, but it's just doing something you think your target audience would benefit from, whether it's like a quick top tip on your stories, or whether it's a carousel post, or if it's a reel or whatever. One trap that I fell down earlier on this year is trying to go for views and likes and things like that, because that's not what matters. So my Instagram page has grown from, I think it's 12,000 at the start of this year, and it has very slowly grown to that point. And then it was one post that went semi, like, quote unquote viral, and it's grown off that, and I think it's like 37 or so at the moment. And my business hasn't changed. Like that extra 25,000 followers hasn't become £25,000 in my bank account.
Oh, that's
You know,
interesting.
it hasn't transformed my business. And what I thought for such a long time is the more followers equals the more potential clients, equals the more people you can help, and the more revenue you have, to look at it from a business point of view. And it's just not the case. I think social media is full of so many vanity metrics, like the likes and the clicks and stuff. And the thing that I find fascinating is that with Facebook, the like button, the comment button, the way that they developed that is based on behavioral science from a guy called, I think it's B.F. Skinner.
Okay.
And he was doing experiments with rats, and he was basically trying to get rats to, I think it was either food pellets or it was drug laced water or something. But he basically realized that if he gave them an incentive to tap a button, they would tap a button. So they needed to tap the button to get whatever it was that came out. I can't remember what it was. And that is what our social media buttons are based on. So our social media buttons are based on rats either being fed or being addicted to drug water. And they've used that, Meta have used that to create these systems. So when I think about it now, I'm thinking, I don't care how many likes or views something gets. If someone comments and says it helps them, or if someone sends me a message, that's the purpose behind my content. And that took me a really long time to kind of, I started off with that. I'm back there now, but I was pulled away from that a little bit earlier this year. In terms of, again, sorry, we could talk about this forever, but in terms of the content creation side, I like just to write down ideas. Like I say, my thing is writing. I think some people's is talking, some people's is drawing, some people's is whatever. I think the best thing you can do with social media is to lean into what works for you. So if you're someone who loves to talk, I mean, I love to talk like this. I don't like talking to my phone so much. I'm not natural on my phone. Whereas now we're just having a chat. So I haven't got to the point yet where I could just have a chat with a blank screen. It doesn't quite work the same
Oh,
way.
that's interesting.
So I write more, and I try and write at least 3 times a week. And I just do it as my first task in the day, because that's when my creative brain is switched on. That's when my energy is switched on. And I just try and write, because from that, I don't know, that 2 page of Google Doc idea, that post, that blog, I might get a carousel out of it. I might get a story post out of it. So I try and do a lot of repurposing content. Now, I'm not at my most organized at the moment, I'll be honest, because just finished the book and other things have happened. However,
Oh,
when I was on my most on it, it was very much, I do my weekly live webinar topic training on a Tuesday night with my clients. If they, it's always recorded, but a lot of them like to come live. And then I would take that and I'd repurpose that for maybe a resource that might get people to kind of send me a message, and I might offer out a free resource. I might literally repurpose the recording, or I might take the ideas and the systems in it and I might make a carousel, or I might use it to think about what the problem is that people are facing and then write a post on that. So I tried to, when my most organized, I had like a flow, and it was like topic training on a Tuesday, went into a Wednesday post, and then I tried to link a testimonial to that as well. And then I repurposed that for a podcast that I recorded, and then I repurposed it for the weekly newsletter. So I did have this funnel where my content went down. So that made creating content a lot easier for me. Sorry, that was a right tangent.
No, that's really interesting. It just highlights the amount of work, and you talking about boundaries. I've kind of had to put it in place for social media, because you do get sucked into that thing of the more followers you have, the more work you'll have. Because especially when you go from permanent teaching, you've got that income coming in all the time, to self-employed, and you are looking for different ways to, make money to, run your business, because it's not like before. You don't have that constant money coming in, so you have to be resourceful. And I think, because I don't know, you just kind of get into this trap. And even recently for myself, I've had to limit the hours I'm on social media, because I'm not productive if I'm on it all the time. And I've literally just, right, that's work time, do it in work time. And my posts are a lot better. I'm a lot more purposeful. I respond to messages, inquiries from families and things. But you can get into that trap, and that wanting more followers because you think that it will benefit your business. Do you think anything has come to you through social media that you wouldn't have had elsewhere? Do you think any opportunities have arisen simply because of your social media?
Do you mean social media in general, or do you mean because it's grown?
Because it's grown, yes, sorry.
Um, Probably not just because it's grown. I don't.
Hmm.
Maybe that might be a thing one day where someone sees it and is like, oh, they have X amount of followers. Personally, I don't view other people like that. I don't know how many people do. I know used to, but I would look at someone and be like, oh, he's got 100,000 followers. Wow, they must be good at what they do. But now I've seen behind the curtain. I know that's not always the point. I know that, I don't know if you've seen this, but so many people in education are posting just like trending audios and trending reels and comedy things because it does get the reach because people like it and share it. But then actually your business isn't selling comedy reels and things. You want to connect with your audience, right? You want to get to know them personally and you want them to see that you can help them. So I've
Hmm.
seen a lot of people trying to go for like that reach and things by using those sorts of things, but actually then falling short because all the people that follow you have liked you from a one-off click, and actually they're not there for
I understand, yeah.
what you're trying to provide for them. But yeah, I wouldn't say so as of yet. But I definitely used to. I would look at somebody's social media following, and if it was bigger, their perceived authority in my mind was greater. I'd be like,
Yeah.
big following, great at what they do. And it's just not the case, is it? I don't think.
No, no.
Yeah, and I think it hasn't yet. I don't think. Like for example, when I got the book offer, I'm making it sound like it's some like great series. It's literally like a little teacher's guide. It's
Oh,
15,000
that's
words.
amazing though.
It's a small book. It's nothing. I haven't written like an Atomic Habits
No,
or
it's still an
something
achievement.
like that. It's
Yeah,
been fun. It's been good to do, and hopefully that will go on to help and things in future.
yeah,
Um, but even then, I think I maybe had, yeah, I think then I had about 12 to 15,000 followers, so
yeah.
it wasn't linked to that sort of growth, I don't think. And actually, if
Oh,
anything, the greater the bigger the following gets, the more difficult it is to get back to people in time, and to, you get a lot more trolls come through and who love to
mm,
sit in the comments and just say things to antagonize. I've started turning comments off on certain posts this year, and I never had to do that before because
mm,
it would just go crazy. And it's not on many; it's maybe be on a handful this year, but it would go crazy, and it would just be a lot of people being really unkind towards teachers, basically. And
mm.
let's not get into that because I don't understand people's mindsets.
No.
Troll people, but
Yeah, the more you look at, because like when I think when you start your business, like for me, I saw amazing tutors online offering incredible things and doing really, really well. And you want to try and do everything and you want to, but I think you do, like you say, you have to really figure out, niche down what is working for you and what you're happy to provide.
mm,
In terms of, I think social media is good because you reach people that you would never be able to reach with just word of mouth. And that has shocked me. Like I've spoken to people in Africa, in India, and all that kind of stuff. And I would have never had that from just word of mouth or flyers or anything like that. And I imagine with you and your clients, you've got clients in various places. So I think that's good. Like that is really good. But it's this weird thing associated, like you say, with the amount of followers, with how good someone is. But yet I know, like I've got tutor friends who aren't on social media, like they've got a Facebook page, but they rarely post. But yet they're full. Their business is thriving and they haven't needed it. So it's an interesting kind of concept, and it is like when you look behind it, it's very much the algorithm and the content that does really, really well. I think of the hours I've done online, trying to build up my business and stuff. And I haven't got a quarter of the views that some people have got based off like the most simplest piece of content. But I
yeah,
think like you do have to realign and think, what am I trying to do? What is the purpose and everything like that? Now, your
yeah,
final piece of advice for someone that is potentially thinking, or no, not leaving, but wanting to change their mental health at work. As a teacher, they're having all these funny signs, maybe like you were, and they don't know what it is. They're just putting it down to just a cold or whatever. What advice would you give them? And then finally, where can we find you?
mm. That is a very good question. A very good question. I think this might be a bit of a cop out, so tell me if it is, and I'll think of something
No,
else.
go for it. Go for it.
But I think the biggest challenge that I'm seeing at the moment with people as teachers is that we, and anyone in education, is that we are so busy. And that doesn't mean that we're productive. It just means that we are busy. We are doing. And our headspace is so full, and we have no capacity to think about anything else. Like, most people know that, okay, I would benefit from getting some more sleep. Cool, I need to take a day off school. I'll benefit from a walk. Maybe I should eat some broccoli. Like, we all know this stuff. Like, the information's there, but the truth is that most teachers don't have the headspace, the capacity, and I know that I certainly didn't, to even think about it. It's not knowing, it's the thinking space to take action. So my number one thing is, if you're feeling like that, just find a little way to create some space for you. That's it. Because when you start to create space, you start to provide yourself a little area where you can think for a second, and you can slow down. And if you want to build upon that, then you can start with, your space could be when you get to school in the morning in the car, you take your coffee or your tea with you, and you just sit in the car with no music on, with not with your phone in your hand, and you just stare out the window for 5 minutes. Because the brain's got something called the default mode network, which is essentially, we've got two main networks. We've got more than two, but two main networks, and they kind of work in like in a seesaw, like in tandem with each other. So you've got the executive network, and then you've got the default mode network. So sorry, the central executive network. So with the default mode network, that's where like all of our problem solving, processing, creative ideas, all these things come from. So, you know, like you're doing the washing up, and that quiz answer from 2 weeks ago just pops into your head. Or you're in the shower washing your hair, and you're like, oh, that was so and so's name. And that's because your brain is in this almost like passive mode. I kind of use it like not sleep mode on your laptop, but that kind of like background mode, you know, because you're not actively doing something. Not using that central executive network. You're not trying to write something, or trying to plan something, or trying to fix a problem. You know, you're not engaged. Your brain is like when you're going for a walk, when you're washing your hair, when you're doing the hoovering, you're doing something passive that's almost automatic, and it's almost a habit. So your brain's got this ability to switch into your default mode network, where you can problem solve. And I think of it as like your brain connecting the dots, and go and emotionally processing, and kind of having creative thought. So that's why that space is so important. Basically, I want to share that because I think that's important. So it could be you get to work and you have 5 minutes before you go into the classroom. It could be that you again, when you get home from work, you park on the drive and you go for a quick 5-minute walk. It could just be that you go and you, at break time, if no one will leave you, if everyone won't leave you alone, you go and you sit on the loo, and you have a 5-minute breather in the loo, and you just allow your brain just to simmer. Because at the moment we are so go, and we can talk about habits, and we can talk about all these other things I'd recommend, but until somebody has space to think about that, then none of it's going to go in, and none of it's going to stick. So number one, find a way to create space. And then what you can do to build on that, use in that space, you can make that space a little bit longer, and you can do things like practicing slowing down. And I mean, like, literally physically slowing down. If I was to put a camera on most teachers' heads throughout the day, it would look like it's going double speed, because people just move around so quickly. We're typing quickly, we're eating quickly, we're walking quickly, I talk quickly anyway, but we're talking quickly. If you actually slow down your physical behaviors, it can really help to take you out of that fight or flight and towards that rest and digest state, and really calm your central nervous system. So once you've created space, do things that you can literally use to calm and slow your brain down. And then you might have some breathing room to then think about, cool, I'll pack some breakfast in the morning instead of getting I don't know, a pasty on the way to school. Not a pasty, a croissant on the way to school. Or, you know, whatever else, you know. That's when you might have space to think about the things that would help. But until you have the space, it's going to be very hard to do that.
Thank you, that's brilliant. And where can we find you if anyone wants to work with you?
So as we said, mostly on Instagram, and I'm not particularly creative with things. It's literally the.teachers.health.coach, because I thought it looked better separated out, so it's a bit of a mouthful. I think on LinkedIn, if you search for the Teachers Health Coach, I've got a podcast that we've done a couple of seasons on that I'm going to bring back in a couple of weeks' time. I try and write a weekly blog, but yeah, mostly Instagram. I'm on Facebook and stuff, but don't really use it much.
Oh, thank you so much. I'll leave all your details down below, so whoever wants to check you out, they can. But I really appreciate you chatting to me. Thank you again.
No worries. Cheers. Thank you.
If you liked today's video, please make sure to like and subscribe to see who else I'm chatting to.